Have you ever considered retiring to a village in Europe? While the lifestyle appeals to many, the logistics of moving abroad can be overwhelming. But here is the good news. You don't need a passport to find that old-world charm. Across the United States, there are unique communities that rival the 58 best small towns in Europe. These locations were built by immigrants who brought their distinct architecture and traditions with them, creating European-style towns in America that have preserved their roots for centuries. Today, we are decoding 10 of these hidden gems. While there are dozens of 46 small towns with this aesthetic, we have selected the top 10 that offer the best blend of culture and atmosphere for your 59 retirement planning. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to Housing Watch and turn on notifications. Your support really helps the channel grow. Let's dive in. Number 10. Lindsborg, Kansas. The Kansas prairie gives you no warning. One moment you're passing endless farmland and grain elevators, and the next, a bright red dollar horse appears by the roadside like a friendly mirage. You slow down out of curiosity, and maybe because your brain needs a second to process what it's seeing. Lindsborg doesn't feel like a themed attraction. It feels more like a memory from another country that drifted inland and decided to stay. The story begins in 1869, when Swedish immigrants arrived in central Kansas, searching for farmland and a stable future. The railroad had just opened the region, and land agents promoted it across Europe as fertile and affordable. What they didn't advertise were the relentless winds and tornadoes. Even so, the settlers came, planted crops, and built a community. But unlike many immigrant towns in the American West, they didn't gradually lose their identity. They strengthened it. For decades, churches held services in Swedish, local newspapers were printed in the language, and Bethany College became a cultural anchor that preserved traditions. Instead of fading into the prairie, Swedish heritage grew more concentrated. Over time, the town began to reflect that identity more visibly. Murals appeared, storefronts adopted Nordic design, and Dala horses began popping up across town like colorful landmarks. Even the atmosphere feels intentional, calm, organized, and quietly distinct. The real shift happened in the mid-20th century, when residents realized their heritage wasn't just history, it was a draw. Rather than modernizing away from its roots, Lindsborg embraced them and marketed itself as Little Sweden, USA. The strategy worked. Today, the town of roughly 3,500 residents welcomes between 150,000 and 200,000 visitors each year, depending on festivals and weather. On major weekends, the population swells dramatically, with visitors parking wherever space allows. The biggest attraction is Svensk Hyllningsfest, held every other October since 1941. For a few days, the town transforms into a living celebration of Swedish culture that feels authentic rather than staged. You'll find folk dancers in traditional clothing, craft demonstrations, music, and heritage displays throughout the streets. It feels less like a performance and more like a shared pause from modern life. Midsummer is another highlight. In June, locals raise a maypole in the Kansas heat and celebrate with dancing, music, and traditional customs straight from Sweden. Throughout the year, art walks, heritage markets, and seasonal festivals keep the Nordic theme alive, blending culture with community events. What makes Lindsborg special is its authenticity. The traditions aren't staged solely for tourists, they exist because locals genuinely value them. Visitors are simply welcome to join in, like guests invited to sit at a family table and share the experience. Drive a few minutes in any direction, and the illusion fades quickly back into rural Kansas. Grain silos replace painted horses, and pickup trucks outnumber tour buses. But for a brief stretch in the middle of the continent, Swedish roots have taken hold so deeply that even the prairie couldn't erase them. Number 9. New Glarus, Wisconsin. In 1845, Swiss immigrants settled in the rolling hills of southern Wisconsin because the landscape reminded them of home, just enough to ease the homesickness. It may not have been the Alps, but it was close enough. They named the town after the canton of Glarus in Switzerland and made a conscious effort to preserve their culture rather than let it fade into the broader Midwestern identity. Dairy farming proved to be a natural fit, and Swiss traditions carried on for generations. Families spoke Swiss German, and chalet-style buildings weren't constructed for tourism. They were simply built the way the settlers knew best. Over time, what felt normal to locals began to stand out to outsiders. Eventually, the town realized its everyday charm was something special. Instead of modernizing downtown, New Glarus embraced its heritage. Painted shutters, carved balconies, and storybook murals transformed the streets into something that feels part alpine village, part fairy tale. Today, the town has around 2,200 residents, but draws nearly 300,000 visitors each year. Many come for the famous brewery, artisan cheese, and the novelty of a Swiss-inspired village tucked into the American Midwest. There's also a local charm that visitors quickly notice: friendly greetings, small-town warmth, and the occasional ope that reminds you you're still in Wisconsin. Festivals keep the community lively year-round. The William Tell Festival, held each Labor Day, reenacts the legendary apple-shooting tale with a playful sense of tradition. Winter brings cozy markets, sledding, and cold-weather festivities that locals embrace wholeheartedly. What truly makes New Glarus memorable is the hospitality. Locals run the booths, greet visitors like neighbors, and make you feel part of the town, even if just for a day. And sooner or later, someone will hand you fried cheese curds. Maybe not Swiss in origin, but undeniably Wisconsin, and absolutely worth the trip. Number 8. Pella, Iowa. You enter Pella the way you enter most Midwestern towns: highways, open fields, scattered silos, and a water tower standing guard. Then suddenly, something unexpected appears: a canal. Not a decorative pond, but a true canal lined with brick storefronts and arched bridges that feel transported from Europe. The prairie doesn't ease you into it. It flips the switch instantly. Pella's story begins in 1847, when Dutch settlers left the Netherlands in search of religious freedom and new opportunities. Europe was crowded and restrictive at the time, while Iowa offered open land, unpredictable weather, and promise wrapped in hard work. They named the town Pella, after a biblical place of refuge, which reveals how they viewed their journey. Like most Midwestern settlers, they farmed immediately. Iowa wasn't about scenery. It was about fertile soil and survival. But while they embraced American farming, they refused to let go of their Dutch identity. Newspapers were printed in Dutch, churches held services in the language for generations, and the architecture reflected familiar European styles. Instead of blending into a typical prairie town, they rebuilt the cultural memory they brought with them. Over time, preservation turned into celebration. By the early 1900s, community leaders recognized that their heritage wasn't just personal. It was worth sharing publicly. Downtown streets were paved with brick, storefronts adopted stepped Dutch gables, and eventually, a canal district took shape, complete with a working drawbridge. The centerpiece of it all is the town's most famous landmark, a towering Dutch windmill. This isn't a replica. It's an authentic 1850s windmill transported from the Netherlands and reconstructed in Pella in 2002. Even more impressive, it still grinds grain today, adding a sense of living history to the town's identity. Despite having only around 10,000 residents, Pella attracts roughly 300,000 to 400,000 visitors each year. The biggest draw is tulip time in May, when hundreds of thousands of tulips bloom across the town in vibrant waves of color. Locals wear traditional Dutch clothing, not as costumes, but as part of a living tradition. Parades fill the streets, wooden shoes clatter on brick sidewalks, and bakeries serve pastries that feel delightfully indulgent. Winter brings another highlight: a European-style Christmas market filled with lights, handcrafted goods, and festive food that makes cold weather feel charming rather than harsh. What makes Pella stand out is that it isn't just a tourist attraction, it's a thriving town. With a local college, stable jobs, and strong community roots, it's a place people genuinely call home. The Dutch festivals and traditions aren't staged add-ons. They're woven into everyday life. Downtown Pella has even been recognized as one of the most beautiful main streets in America, and many families still trace their ancestry back to the original settlers, attending the same churches their ancestors built. In Pella, history isn't preserved behind glass. It's lived. Number 7. Holland, Michigan. Dutch immigrants didn't just settle Holland in 1847, they arrived determined to recreate a piece of their homeland. Fleeing economic struggles and religious limitations in the Netherlands, they landed in the dense, mosquito-filled wilderness of western Michigan and set out to build a Dutch-inspired community from the ground up. The early years weren't easy. Swamps had to be drained, forests cleared, and farmland established. But as the town grew, the settlers preserved their identity by naming streets after places back home and weaving Dutch traditions into everyday life. Over time, Holland became one of the strongest examples of European heritage shaping an American town. Rather than downplaying their roots, residents leaned into them. Windmills appeared, canals were added, and Dutch architecture became part of the city's visual identity. Eventually, this pride gave rise to the now famous Tulip Time Festival, when the town bursts into color each spring. Millions of tulips bloom across parks and streets. Locals wear wooden shoes and traditional costumes, and schoolchildren perform dances that feel straight out of a European postcard. During festival season, visitors arrive by the busload, giving the lakeshore a distinctly international feel. For a few weeks, nearby Lake Michigan might as well be the North Sea in spirit. Of course, the seasons remind you this is still Michigan. After the tulips fade, long winters settle in. Holland sits southwest of Grand Rapids along the Lake Michigan shoreline, with Lake Macatawa at its edge, blending Dutch charm with classic Great Lakes scenery year-round. Number 6. Tarpon Springs, Florida. In the early 1900s, Greek sponge divers arrived in Tarpon Springs and transformed this coastal community into something that feels unmistakably Mediterranean. Rather than blending into typical Florida culture, they built a waterfront that mirrors a Greek seaside village. Traditional restaurants line the docks, Greek signage is everywhere, and the Orthodox cathedral rises prominently above the skyline. Technically part of the Tampa Bay metro area, Tarpon Springs isn't a standalone town, but culturally, it feels worlds apart. The atmosphere is distinctly Greek, right up until you notice the Florida details. In Greece, you might see cats lounging near fishing boats. Here, it's pelicans watching the docks like unofficial inspectors. Sponge diving remains a defining part of the town's identity, and the Greek heritage is celebrated through lively festivals. One of the most important is the annual Epiphany celebration on January 6th. Rooted in Greek Orthodox tradition, the event features ceremonial blessings and a dramatic dive into the water. honoring the town's sponge diving origins. March brings the Greek Independence Day Parade, complete with cultural festivities, music, and community pride. Another favorite is Night in the Islands, where the historic sponge docks come alive with outdoor dancing, authentic Greek food, and live music. Tarpon Springs stands out as one of the most vibrant Greek cultural hubs in the United States. Sun-soaked, historic, and proudly unique along Florida's Gulf Coast. Number 5. St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine didn't begin as a charming historic destination. It started as Spain staking its claim in the New World. Founded in 1565, it predates Jamestown by decades and stands as the oldest continuously inhabited European established city in the United States. Long before it became a travel hotspot, it was a strategic military outpost. Over the centuries, the city endured constant power struggles. Pirates raided it, the British seized it, Spain reclaimed it, and Florida itself changed hands multiple times. Yet instead of erasing its past with each transition, St. Augustine layered history on top of itself. While many American cities modernized and rebuilt, this one preserved its timeline almost intact, like a living archive rather than a reinvention. The most iconic example is the Castillo de San Marcos. Built from coquina, a unique stone made of compressed seashells, the fortress looks decorative but proved incredibly resilient. The Spanish discovered that once quarried and dried, coquina could absorb impact instead of shattering. When cannonballs struck the walls during battles, they often embedded harmlessly rather than breaking through. With walls ranging from 9 to 18 feet thick, the fort functioned like a giant shock absorber, frustrating enemies who watched their firepower literally sink into the structure. Today, the same centuries-old layout that once prioritized defense and shade now creates a different challenge: traffic. The narrow streets were never designed for modern vehicles, and navigating them can feel like a collision between 17th century planning and 21st century driving. It's a reminder that this city wasn't built with SUVs in mind. What makes St. Augustine remarkable is how seamlessly history blends into daily life. Locals sip coffee beside buildings older than the U.S. Constitution. Students pass colonial gates on their way to school. Modern storefronts stand within walking distance of fortifications once meant to defend empires. Tourism now drives much of the local economy. Trolley tours, ghost walks, pirate museums, and waterfront weddings bring visitors year-round. In many ways, living here can feel like existing inside a museum rather than simply visiting one. While it has evolved into a major tourist destination, St. Augustine remains a rare example of a city that never abandoned its European roots. Its beauty lies not just in its architecture, but in the way it preserves centuries of stories, stacked, weathered, and still standing. Number 4. Santa Barbara, California. Santa Barbara hasn't always had its iconic Mediterranean look. Originally, it was just another California port town, filled with a mix of wooden structures, Victorian homes, and whatever buildings locals happened to construct. That all changed in 1925, when a massive earthquake leveled much of downtown. In that disaster, the city found a rare opportunity, a chance to rebuild with purpose. Rather than replacing everything haphazardly, city leaders made a deliberate choice. They embraced Santa Barbara's Spanish and Mexican heritage and established strict architectural guidelines that still govern the city today. These rules ensure that nearly every building, from government offices to shops, shares a cohesive aesthetic. White stucco walls, red tiled roofs, and arches reminiscent of colonial Spain. The goal wasn't merely decoration, it was policy. The Santa Barbara County Courthouse exemplifies this vision. Designed like a romantic colonial palace, it features towers, arches, murals, and gardens, and has become a must-photograph landmark for visitors. Even chain stores are subtly forced to dress up, blending into the town's curated streetscape rather than standing out with typical corporate designs. The result is a city that feels like a cohesive, lived-in set, elegant, consistent, and unmistakably Spanish in style. Tourism thrives on this consistency. Visitors come for the beaches but stay for the atmosphere, wandering State Street as if they've discovered a little slice of coastal Spain without leaving California. Cruise passengers regularly arrive in town, often joining wine tours just 20 minutes inland or visiting the historic mission perched on the hill. A reminder that this region was part of New Spain long before California became a state. In Santa Barbara, urban planning, history, and aesthetics combine to create a city that feels both authentic and curated. It's a Spanish seaside town that learned English, bought surfboards, and hired an architectural chaperone to ensure nothing disrupts the vibe. Every building, street, and plaza works together, giving visitors a seamless experience of California's Mediterranean charm. Number 3. Solvang, California. Solvang exists thanks to a group of Danish educators who, in 1911, decided the Midwest wasn't for them. After enduring harsh winters, they set their sights on California's Santa Ynez Valley, hoping to build a community where Danish immigrants could preserve their language, traditions, and Lutheran values without freezing every winter. In the beginning, Solvang didn't look especially European. Early photos show a typical rural farming town with simple wooden storefronts and dusty roads. The storybook aesthetic came later, particularly during the 1930s and after World War II. That's when the town realized something important. Americans were more than willing to travel for a European experience that didn't require a passport. From there, Solvang fully embraced its identity. Plain buildings were replaced with half-timbered facades, windmills appeared, and bakeries began offering traditional Danish pastries that visitors eagerly lined up to try, whether they could pronounce them or not. Rather than replicating Denmark exactly, the architecture evolved into a blend of Danish inspiration and laid-back California charm. Even the famous Little Mermaid statue is more of a friendly tribute than a perfect replica of Copenhagen's original. Today, tourism shapes much of Solvang's rhythm. Danish days bring parades, folk dancing, and plenty of indulgent pastries. In December, the Julefest celebration transforms the town into a cozy holiday village filled with lights, markets, and festive decorations, despite the mild Southern California weather. The contrast can feel amusing, with visitors sipping hot cocoa in short sleeves while enjoying the illusion of a European winter. Weekends add another layer of character. Surrounded by wine country, Solvang attracts travelers exploring nearby vineyards. The result is a uniquely Californian blend. Danish bakeries alongside wine-tasting rooms, cyclists cruising scenic roads, and visitors hopping between culture and countryside in a single afternoon. Over time, the Danish language and accents faded, but the traditions, and especially the recipes, remained. Solvang today feels less like a preserved historical village and more like a heritage-inspired town that evolved into a real, lived-in community. For many visitors, that's part of the charm. It offers a refreshing change from the Spanish-style architecture common across Southern California. Quaint, colorful, and undeniably unique, Solvang delivers a playful slice of Denmark on the California coast. Whether you're visiting for the pastries, the scenery, or the novelty, it's an easygoing destination that feels both themed and authentic at the same time. Number 2. Leavenworth, Washington. Tucked into the Cascade Mountains about 2 hours east of Seattle, Leavenworth, Washington, is one of the most strikingly themed towns in the United States, and it works year-round, not just during Oktoberfest. The entire town has fully committed to a German Alpine identity, complete with painted facades, beer halls, Christmas markets, and a calendar packed with festivals that keep the Bavarian spirit alive. Nestled among the towering Cascades, the scenery reinforces the illusion so effectively that when you walk through downtown, you almost expect to pay in euros instead of dollars. During the holiday season, the town transforms into a glittering wonderland, and the Leavenworth webcam shows just how magical the lights and decorations are. A perfect preview for visitors planning a trip. Tourism drives the local economy, especially in the heart of downtown. Here, every building looks like it belongs to the same extended Alpine family. Step outside the Central District, and the mountain town vibe returns, but the core of Leavenworth is fully immersive, creating an experience that transports you straight to Bavaria without leaving the Pacific Northwest. Leavenworth's transformation didn't happen overnight. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, a series of devastating fires destroyed much of the town and helped dismantle the lumber industry, closing mills and forcing businesses to relocate. By 1929, the community turned to recreation and tourism as a new economic strategy, opening a ski jump to draw visitors. The real turning point came in 1962 with Project Life, Leavenworth Improvement for Everyone. This initiative partnered with the University of Washington to identify strategies to revitalize a struggling logging town. The idea of a Bavarian-themed village came out of the study, and in 1965, local leaders visited Solvang, California, to see how a European-inspired town could function in America. Inspired by what they saw, they returned with community support for the plan, and by 1970, Leavenworth was hosting multiple annual festivals, including Oktoberfest, Mayfest, and Christkindlmarkt. Much like Santa Barbara, the town maintains a design review board responsible for ensuring that the Alpine aesthetic endures. Buildings, signage, and even some chain stores must adhere to strict architectural guidelines to preserve the German village illusion. Traveling to Leavenworth is part of the adventure. The Amtrak route from Seattle offers breathtaking views of the mountains. Westbound travelers experience the Cascades emerging around sunrise, reaching Seattle by late morning. Eastbound, the train climbs through dramatic mountain passes, often arriving in Leavenworth after dark, creating an experience akin to watching a moving painting come to life. Leavenworth is more than a novelty. It's a fully realized destination where festivals, German cuisine, Alpine architecture, and natural scenery combine to create a unique year-round experience. Whether you visit for Oktoberfest, Christmas markets, or simply the picturesque downtown streets, it's a town that transforms the mountains into a little slice of Bavaria, in the heart of Washington state. Before we get to number 1, which of these European-style towns have you visited? Or which one's on your bucket list? Share your stories in the comments. Number 1. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, the crown jewel of European-inspired cities in the U.S. Step into the French Quarter, especially around Bourbon Street, and you're immediately immersed in iron balconies, lush courtyards, narrow winding streets, and architecture that predates the nation itself. Unlike towns that consciously mimic European styles, New Orleans feels like a city that grew naturally, a place where French, Spanish, Creole, and other cultures blended over centuries into something unique, refusing to simplify or sanitize itself. The atmosphere is unmistakable. Music drifts through the humid air. Street performers and jazz musicians fill the squares, and every corner seems alive with history. It doesn't feel like America pretending to be European. It feels like a parallel timeline where cultures coexist in full vibrancy. Yes, the city has crime and challenges, and Bourbon Street can feel tourist-heavy. But even amidst that, New Orleans is endlessly fun and fascinating. For anyone visiting, it's worth exploring beyond the Bourbon Street corridor. The French Quarter, Garden District, and Bywater offer architectural treasures, rich Creole and Cajun cuisine, and streets imbued with centuries of history. Local residents are often eager to share stories, whether about historic buildings, jazz origins, or the city's colonial past. That willingness to share adds depth to every stroll, making New Orleans feel alive in a way most cities cannot replicate. Unlike places like Santa Barbara or Leavenworth, which intentionally adopted European aesthetics, New Orleans has been European in style from the start. Founded in 1718 by French colonists as the territorial capital of French Louisiana, the city thrived under French and Spanish rule before the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. By 1840, it was the third largest city in the United States and the biggest urban center in the American South. Today, New Orleans remains a major tourist destination, and its charm extends far beyond the famous bars of Bourbon Street. From historic architecture to world-class cuisine, vibrant music, and centuries of culture layered into every neighborhood, it's a city that truly embodies the European spirit on American soil. If you're taking a Caribbean cruise, consider stopping in New Orleans for a day or two. It's an unforgettable introduction to Louisiana's most historic and visually stunning city. That wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and picked up some useful tips. Go out, have an amazing day, and remember to be kind to everyone around you.